Hello, everybody. If the technology would help, there we go. Jesus. When you click a button and nothing happens, that's when stuff goes sideways. Welcome to the latest episode of Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of old dudes who've been playing D&D since the 1970s try to tell you how to have a better game, because that's just how helpful we are. So I am Shane.
And I am Andrew.
And eventually we will be so old that our podcast will have been running for at least 7,000 episodes. First of all, before we do anything, I want everyone to know that this podcast is sponsored by Cawood Publishing at worldofmere.com. You can buy all kinds of cool stuff there, and if you don't, I pity you. This week we're talking about making a dungeon adventure. However, there is a Kickstarter currently underway. What is the latest?
All right. The latest is live. All right. We are at 420 backers, which is fantastic.
Excellent.
And that is about 80% funded. So that's really good. Yeah. We have 8 days to go. And we have over 600 people signed up for the 48-hour alert. So Kickstarter will send out a notice to you, an email saying, hey, the project's going to end in 2 days. How would you like to join it? And we have over 600 of those people. So hopefully a lot of them will join on. And it's rolling along. It's in good shape. And we're pretty excited about making a really good book, probably the best yet. And
nice.
We just found out that an interview we did with EN World is going to have an article published on Thursday. So that should help. That should help bring some people on board. And I just want to thank that small group of people really who's helped us get the word out. We don't have thousands of dollars for advertising. And we're a small team of 3 to do this project. So it's really a very small group, people all over the world who are helping to get the word out. And a lot of third-party companies like ours who, we help out when they need something and they help us out. And I just really want to thank all those people. And many of them go into the special thanks in the book.
Nice. Well, especially, didn't you tell me maybe 2 books ago that there always is this rush? I guess that's what the 48-hour notice is about. Like there's a huge rush at the end.
Yeah. Even before they did that alert, though, the end was always usually a good push. I think our first really big Kickstarter, Monsters of Feyland, I think 20% of the funding came in the last 2 hours.
Holy hell.
Yeah. So then now that with the alert, usually that last day or 2 is usually quite strong. And there are quite a lot of people who are waiting to see where the Kickstarter is, how it's doing and where it's going to fit.
Nice.
Although it would help if those people join in, because then the Kickstarter gets a lot of momentum and does well. If everybody's just watching and not joining, we hope a lot of people take that leap of faith.
Well, I'm happy about that because, and I want to say as well that supporting small projects like this is so important because I think the bulk of people that create content for a lot of different role-playing games, but for D&D, are small groups of people. Like you just said, 3 people are working on this. And I just want you guys to know that it takes a lot of work to do this. To do the same level of quality as a large publisher is huge. I have myself seen so many Kickstarters that have come and gone that even got to the point where they were printed and sent off to people, but were just basically Word documents that no one really knew how to format properly. I mean, all the power to somebody trying to make something, but at the same time, to do stuff at the same level as people with a lot of money behind them is kind of an incredible feat. And Andrew, you have done it so many times now. I'm surprised that you haven't run off into the woods and said, "Forget it, I can't take the stress." But so kudos to you for doing that, because I have nothing to do with the Kickstarters. I just want them to be successful, because at the end of the day, give Andrew money and I get a really great product. So there you go. And for anyone who thinks that I'm here getting paid to do this, are you kidding me? I just get to go and play D&D with cool people. So that's my reward. Which reminds me, I still haven't picked up my Phelan 2 book. I got to pick that up the next time that we play in person.
Yeah, it's sitting right here. Yeah, it looks like we might be back playing in person next month.
Yes, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, thank you all for supporting the Kickstarter for Cawood Publishing, because it means a lot to me and to a bunch of people. So, but today, let's get cruel. We're talking about making dungeons. And basically, for me, I have been doing this for a very long time, just for myself and the games that I've done. Andrew does it probably, 17, 20 hours a day, something like that. So, what is the very first thing that somebody needs to know in order to get a dungeon adventure rolling?
Well, the most important thing is the story. I think no matter what you're doing. So, yeah, first you have to have a good story. There are a lot of classic dungeon adventures. We've mentioned some of those in the the last few shows. So there, of course, is the classic story of the heroes being hired by someone to go find a magical item or go rescue somebody. So that's one general kind of idea of starting the dungeon adventure. And another one would be finding a map, a treasure map, or any kind of map that has a location identified, and you find out that's a dungeon. Maybe you only find out when you get there. There's another classic story when the local people need help, and maybe the villain is using the dungeon as their headquarters, and they're raiding the village or they're haunting the village.
I think that's a very common one. Like, that one seems to me helping somebody else, which is kind of funny because it's such a D&D thing to do. You walk into anywhere as a character, and if somebody asks for help, your first instinct is, I'm going to totally help you. It could be a scam, it could be something horrible, but that's the cool part, is that you don't really know, but you're hoping that helping out is a good thing. I really like this in the notes, the surprised to find a dungeon. I've never thought of that before, of like, we're an adventuring party. Whoa! So like Batman, falling into a pit of bats. I think that's such a cool idea.
Yeah, or you just, like I said, you just have a map and there's a location marked, and you go there, and that's, you might be expecting it's a village or it's a castle or something, and you find maybe there's nothing, and then you find an entrance to a dungeon. Another one, like especially back in the day with a lot of combat focused stories, the dungeon as a fortress is always a good one. It's easy to defend, like a castle or a keep or a dungeon or a cave from a larger group. And then there's, a dungeon that's a tomb, treasure vault. That's always motivating for the characters. I like actually the one having one underneath a manor, or some sort of building underneath an inn, tavern. I like that quite a bit. Then there's the wizard headquarters. Like in this new book, we're going to have a whole section called Arcane Dungeons, which actually you can download for free right now on the Kickstarter. And I love that idea of having a wizard, basically like a wizard's tower, a wizard's workshop, but it's in a dungeon. There's lots of like different factions that would use a dungeon, like bandits, the Thieves Guild. And then I also like the idea of dungeons that have tunnels that lead everywhere. So maybe you're on the coast and you arrive on the coast and you find a sea cave and you discover something there, and then there's an entranceway, and that entranceway leads you into a tunnel that ends up in a dungeon.
A la sort of the Goonies and that kind of stuff
Yeah,
back in the day.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
like that one quite a bit too. So that you've got your general story, then you want to have obviously the big bad evil guy, your villain. So there's liches, dragons, wizards, especially necromancers. The evil priest, that's a very kind of old school version. A bandit lord, slave lord, a master thief. So there's many kinds of creatures, although it's more likely in a medieval type classic fantasy game, it's more likely that your dungeon villain will end up being some sort of humanoid because it's a
Yeah.
man-made structure, but not always. Like a dragon could be in there, a beholder possibly could be in there, but it's more likely like that it's going to be a humanoid.
I kind of like I like the adventures when you're in a dungeon that are like you're infiltrating a base and of some sort that's not necessarily a dragon lair or a lich,
Mm-hmm.
but it mainly because for the longest time I've always loved that idea that you could in theory have an adventure where you do zero fighting, that you are stealthing the whole way and you sneak in, you get what you need or what you want, and then you get out. I've never ever had that happen in a game before because it's kind of impossible because you're always going to fail some stealth check somewhere. But I always have just liked that idea that you have the ability to go into some sort of elaborate network of caves or some sort of underground constructed dungeon that's laid out in a certain way. Like, you've got where the barracks are, and you've got the, where the main, headquarters area is with whatever it is you're trying to get. I just love that idea. And there's probably a ton of movies out there that have influenced that over the years, but still, the kind of heistish stuff
Mm-hmm.
I think would be very cool as a concept in a game. Again, dice are cruel and you're never ever going to pull that off, but I could always wish.
Yeah, that's a good point. That reminds me of the Giant series quite a bit. So
Yeah,
G1 to 3 against the Giants. That's what that feels like to me. You're sneaking in. You don't really want to deal with the Giants head on. So that one, yeah, that's a good example, I think. Then, of course, you have all the minions of these leaders, the villains. You have wandering monsters. Again, you're going to have quite a few humanoids probably in a dungeon. Things like oozes and small beasts, which we've mentioned before. Then you want to consider the size. There can be very, very small dungeons, like underneath a small tavern, to immense dungeons like the Mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings, where you have
yeah.
200-foot tall statues and 500-foot tall columns and
I am
actually,
waiting for that adventure where your addiction to having statues that come to life are 200 feet tall.
well, speaking of that,
Oh, damn.
as we go
I
through,
better leave now.
yeah, so we're going to divide the book into 7 different types of dungeons, and I'm editing it right now. And the last type of dungeon are the mountain dungeons. And all I think about when I'm doing this are the Mines of Moria size dungeons. So I was looking today at the CRs. So if you look through the Arcane dungeon, the one that's downloadable on the Kickstarter page, so the CRs are like 1, 2, 3, 7, 2, 1, 1, 3. And then you look, I was looking today in the monster in the mountain dungeon section. It's like 5, 9, 15, 17, 30, 16. Like, yes, there's a CR30 creature in the mountain dungeon. So have fun with that.
Oh god, that's awesome.
So
I
yeah, you
mean,
want to
why
consider,
not? The challenge is there to be had, and the challenge, challenge accepted.
yeah, and again, you want to have a good challenge. So that would be high level party, obviously. So you want to consider the size. There's a huge range, and the layout. It's not like, again, when we started playing in the 70s, you can just go online and there's dungeon generators everywhere and there's maps everywhere. So if you want to look for a dungeon layout just to get some ideas, you can do that easily, or you can just be extremely creative and do your own thing. Next, entrances. So this is a classic part of dungeons. Is there a key to the entrance? Is there a riddle, like a magic mouth on the door that asks you a riddle to open? Is there a magical protection on the door? And then I love like false doors and false entrances, and a good place to put traps.
Yep, Tomb of Horrors had that, I think, if I remember correctly. I
Yes,
think we
it had
mentioned that last time.
more than one. And Lost Caverns of Tsojicanth also has that. Spoiler alert. And I also like foreshadowing things. So the earliest you can do that is at the entrance. So for example, if I had a dungeon maybe where a vampire was, maybe I would just have a door handle with like a little gargoyle face on it, and maybe there's some bats carved into the stone, right? If there was a demon, maybe I would have like a demonic figure carved in with like a little tail and horns. I
Yeah.
like to have those little elements, and you can add those to your dungeon all over, but doing them right at the beginning is like a little hint to the players, which I like. I like that quite a bit.
I was just going to say that I seem to recall that what was the adventure? It was the one near Knox. We were close to Knox. We weren't at the city yet.
Mhm.
And I've forgotten what the encounter was, but it was in hindsight where you just said in an offhanded kind of way, oh, yeah, there was the thing on the side of the road. Side of the road? What were we talking about? Going back in the notes? No one had written it down. Like, there was
Mhm.
no record of it. Although, it might have. Did we record the audio at that for those ones? I don't
Yeah, we
remember.
were still recording audio then. Yeah.
If we did, it's probably in there. But yeah, I remember a few times going back and just kind of going, yes, thanks for that. The large dragon that just ate the whole party. There was like a talon on the ground. Then if you noticed it, great. If you didn't, whatever. Just
Right.
a tiny detail.
Yeah, just something that, if you want to pay attention to it, fine. If you don't, I'm just going to keep going.
My passive perception is garbage.
Yeah. All right. Another thing to consider, we've talked a lot about, is light issues with the dungeons. So you could have no lights, no sconces with torches, really challenge the party. You could make it super easy and have everything lit with torches. Um,
Yeah.
it's something to consider. You could mix them up. That's usually what I do, is I mix it up a bit. The natural environment. So a lot of dungeons have cavern um, elements to them, or big areas that are caverns, because it's so easily, because dungeons are built into a natural foundation, and it's so easy for there to be a hole in the wall, and then now you're in a cavern, with a rocky cavern. So the two really go together quite a bit. Like cave
Yeah.
adventure and dungeon adventure are really they really sort of blend together in many ways. So you can do that. You could have, okay, there's a hole in the wall here, and now this has allowed like troglodytes to come from the underworld into the dungeon, or other creatures. That's how you can have more monsters in your dungeon too, is if there's places where the dungeon's broken or been abandoned, and now the natural creatures of the in that location get in.
Yeah, there's lots of times where, like, this happens, I think, in every adventure. Going back to G1 through 3, I mean, that happened a couple times where you, if I remember correctly, you could actually enter that dungeon from the opposite direction rather than going through the traditional way. I've forgotten exactly how that was played out in one of those modules, but you could actually wander off and find a cave that actually got you down to like a second level or something.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of those things, you have like water erosion, you have underground lakes, or sorry, underground rivers and stuff like that. Cave-ins, or somebody else or a creature has tunneled in, and you've just kind of followed the tunnel, not realizing what it was, and then it's like, oh, I'm suddenly in a basement of somewhere. Like, where is this? And that's quite common for a lot of the dungeon adventures that we've been on, and I think it is almost kind of a cool thing to do, where you actually take. I'm not going through the front door. No, I've heard there's a back door. There's some other way in, and it's kind of like dungeons in, say, Skyrim, where you know that where you're wandering into, there's somewhere that you can't quite see, are usually up high, is where you come out and then you jump down and then you go out the front door again. I'm trying to remember if there were any dungeons that had, if you walked in one way and you exited another, could you do it the other way around in Skyrim? I can't remember. But those kinds of dungeons are I don't know. I kind of like those, the alternative that you don't have to go through the usual way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like to give the players usually more choices, and I think usually the bigger dungeon, the more there are. And I like to give lots
True.
of routes of and think about where, how's the party going to come in? Where's the fight going to be? How are they going to get out? What options do they have? So it's a good point to mention about entrances too, because some people these days don't like having riddles or getting a key or something where you have to have this, otherwise you can't get through. So I think it's nice to have options.
They don't like challenge? What?
Well, it's sort of a new thing that come up in the last few years, from what I've seen. But I think it is nice to have those different options. So maybe you could smash the door in, maybe you can search for an alternate entrance. And
I mean, the reality is dungeons aren't normally a waltz right in kind of thing. Like,
No.
the older the dungeon, the more decrepit it's going to become, the more worn out it's going to be if it's not maintained by whatever inhabitants are there. Because, an owlbear or spiders or something that you generally will run across are not going to, like, well, there's no one invading us today, but let's get on the scaffolding, boys. We got to get fix the door. I'm like, they're not going to do that. That's not what they're there for. But other places, like, I don't know, orcs and stuff like that in Mordor, they built these large constructs because they were told to, and it's to repair whatever's there and to defend it better or whatever the logic is. But you're never going to, imagine walking into a dungeon on day one after completion. You've got the evil wizard is like on the doorknob with a rag, and then us idiots come walking in. Hey, we heard there's something really cool here. I mean, what if a dungeon was pristine and had not been inhabited yet? Just like whoever built it is there, and it's like,
yeah. Yeah, I love that idea. Like, the guard rotation hasn't been set up properly. It's not organized, right? Things are broken. Like the door.
How did they get the gem?
Yeah,
Barry hadn't shown up yet. The locks will arrive on Tuesday.
Yeah. There's a marking on the floor that says "Put the treasure chest here," but it hasn't come in yet. Right?
Oh, that would be so awesome.
Yeah.
I challenge somebody out there to make an adventure on day one of it being completed, but it hasn't been, populated properly yet.
Yeah, I think it is more interesting having those dungeons where the natural world has come in more. So, there's holes that go into caverns. There's, like you said, underwater rivers or lakes. You can describe how things have got wet and there's water dripping down the side of maybe down the side of the wall. There's plants that are starting to grow in the cracks. So I think those dungeons are really cool. They have more a character.
Oh, totally.
And then, of course, all the different kinds of doors and gates that you have in a dungeon. So they could have traps. You could have a portcullis that has, they have to find a different way of opening this. There could be portals that maybe transport you to a different part of the dungeon or to another world.
That has happened.
Traps we've mentioned a lot. So obviously, you could have traps throughout. Um, and then riddles and puzzles I personally love. And I would give the players options in terms of having alternate, other ways to go through, or, maybe they just don't get, at certain times, maybe they just don't find that a treasure there because they couldn't open that door because they didn't solve that riddle.
I
But yeah,
like that
I
kind of
like it.
stuff, The challenge is there. It needs to be there. And hearing that there is, I guess, some voices out there about D&D who think that having a key to the front door of a dungeon, whatever the key sort of manifests as, is kind of sad, because you look at every single, say, video game, you look at board games, you look at there's puzzles everywhere, and that's part of the enjoyment, is that you have that sense of accomplishment. And if you're not doing that, if you are saying, come on, why can't we just get to the treasure, then find the alternative door, dodge all the monsters, be boring, and then go and play a video game instead. Like, that just kind of frustrates me as somebody. It's like, the point of the game is to have fun, but part of the fun are all these things you can do, the weird, crazy situations that you can have a part in building, like climbing up a monster's face and stabbing it that close range, or hey guys, I think that the word in Elvish is blah, and suddenly the sparkly door opens. Like, I mean, in Lord of the Rings, getting through that one door into Moria was basically like them sitting around. I think in the book, it's like they're sitting around for like 5 days, kind of going, "How do we open this door? I can't remember. I don't know. Try hitting your head on it again." There's all these
Mhm.
ridiculous things that can happen, but it also begs the players to get inventive. Of, hey guys, if we walk around this way for a day, maybe we'll find a different way in, because we know this place is huge. That kind of stuff, and the DM can be like, oh, I didn't think of that. All right. Oh, suddenly there's a big crack 2 miles down the wall of this large mountain. So go in that way. It allows you to have the creativity to build the fun. And I think that if there are people out there that are kind of poo-pooing on that, to you guys.
Okay, and there's also the possibility of having magical walls in the dungeon, glyphs, like magical glyphs that could be on the floor, on a door, on an entrance, and illusions. This is a very popular thing back in the day, is illusions in the dungeon. Um,
Yeah.
and then I also mentioned statues. As Shane said, I always like to have statues around, because usually it's fine, nothing's going to happen. But then once in a while, slam. And then they get casual and they get all cocky and everything's fine, and then slam. So yeah, it's a good thing to do. And I know in our Underworld book, originally the first monster alphabetically was going to be an angel, and just before we had it published, I was like, "There's no way I should have an Underworld book where the first monster is an angel. It's just wrong." And so we substituted an animated statue because it started with A, and yeah, and it was quite appropriate. Another thing you can have in dungeons, which is great, are arrow slits or murder holes, where the players get into a larger space or a hallway, and you've got usually humanoids with bows or crossbows waiting to attack.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think I have had that happen where we've actually had some form of murder holes. I love that murder holes, but yeah, but not kind of like that whole idea that you're going into a dungeon. I mean, this was common in like bunkers and things in World War II and stuff, where you had these small hallways that basically were like, if they get this far, there's a machine gun right there just to like mow them all down.
Yeah,
but you don't see that a lot in dungeons these
no,
days.
no, not
So
enough.
yeah, that actually. Oh, now that I've said it out loud, I know we're going to be playing soon.
All All right, now as part of the layout in the dungeon and going from chamber to chamber, obviously you have passages, usually made out of stone, but sometimes they could be, natural rock. Um, these are great areas because the fighting can be in close quarters. It gets complicated, movement gets complicated. Who's at the front of the party, who's at the back of the party is a big deal. And there could be tunnels that go to other locations in the dungeon or outside. And I would definitely make this part of the dungeon and have this as part of the adventure, but I wouldn't overdo it. I wouldn't want the party like spending 80% of the time fighting just in narrow corridors.
Yeah.
I think that would kind of, they would get bored of that, or it'd get,
Well,
it's
it can be frustrating.
it
Like it
can
can
be
be
tough.
frustrating.
It's easier when, believe it or not, when you have less people. Of course, your party has less chance of surviving then. But a big party, it gets complicated. Even with 4 or 5 players, actually, it can
Well,
be.
yeah, I mean, there's times where it's like, okay, we're basically in a corridor that is big enough for, or just big enough for like the largest character, and then you are going there and you're looking around, you're doing the stuff you need to do, but then you have this problem, and the problem is, okay, the villain or the character that we're interacting with is in the next room. There's a door in the way, and then there's one person in the door, and then 4 people or 5 people outside.
Yeah.
And I hate those rolls where you hear the DM say, okay, they've rolled this, and that poor person in the doorway is just getting murdered, and there's nothing you can do because you're 4 people back, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
I could totally help, I could get in there and I could set him on fire or whatever it is, and then you can't, because, well, okay, my movement only allows me to, I can get 2 just before the door.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're like a halfling and can move through smaller areas, and
Yeah.
you have a bit of an advantage that way, but ultimately, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of picking on that one moment because you'd think we'd had that happen a few times.
Well, like I said before, it can be tricky, with even to the point of the movement. So, oh, the party lost that character because the gnome only moved 25 and not 30. Or you move into a character's space, and then when you move out, the monster gets an opportunity attack against you. So it gets pretty interesting.
Why
Um,
do parties never just back out, let the opportunity attack happen, and close the door? Okay, guys, there's a really big angry thing in there. Do we really need to kill it? Do we really need to go that
yeah,
way? Oh, we can go
because
this way?
opening the
All right,
door
let's
is
go
not
that
an
way.
action. Opening the door is just part of your
Oh,
turn. So
that's right. We talked about
yeah,
that several episodes ago. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So then you can look at other areas, other elements of the dungeon. So the floor is obviously another good place. You could have traps and even entrances like trapdoors. Then there's the ceilings where it's a good place to have things hiding,
Right.
including creatures. Alcoves, like little niches inside dungeons. You can have like a statue maybe, or another good place for a trap. Um, the halls, the big chambers, great places for combat. Um, because of the tight spaces in the corridors, better places usually in general for a battle to happen in the big halls and big open spaces. Um, again, if you're going to have humanoids running the place, there's a good chance you're going to have guard rooms and you're going to have some sort of organized defense. And again, the smarter the monster, the better organized. And luckily, most monsters are not that smart, which we had a whole episode about. Most of the monsters do not know what they're doing, and it's a good thing. Um, the another element would be an armory. Again, if you have humanoid troops, and this is a great chance for the players to restock weapons, maybe to get an item they don't have. I always love including this because if you're going to have a guard room, some kind of defense, they're definitely going to have an armory. And once in a while, I'll drop a few magic weapons, maybe that have like maybe the orcs haven't noticed. There's some magical arrows in that armory, that sort of thing, and a good treasure for a good prize for the players. Storerooms, always going to have storerooms, and a good place to have loot for the characters and supplies and food, as well as finding food in their kitchens. And you have to think about, what would these creatures eat? Like, how much would be there? How would they get it? And then
Well, exactly, because they could be an organized force of humanoids of some kind that are intelligent enough to be like, okay, we have a chef, and by the way, mess hall opens at 5 a.m. or whatever it is, right?
yeah,
Where not every single dungeon is a bunch of, large four-legged creatures that are just running around eating whatever they can find. I mean, that's, yeah. I find a
yeah,
lot of people kind of find that one zone and they kind of write stories that way, and they keep,
yeah,
bringing the same sort of things to the surface rather than thinking that the dungeon could, well, actually, like we were pointing out a little while ago, like the dungeon could be a boat. It could be a large ship that you're dungeon crawling on decks of a
hmm
ship, and then you get to the end and there's the villain or whatever. So yeah, or it could be the beginning of something new. So
yeah, yeah. That's true. And thinking about how are they going to cook the food? How's the smoke going to get out of the dungeon? Um, how are they
that's
going
a
to get
very
fire?
good point.
Yeah. How are they
Little
going to get?
chimneys in the middle of the woods. You're like, what are these for?
Yeah. I always add that in. I don't. Maybe once I've had a character kind of like checked it out because he wanted to find a way of seeing if, yeah, I guess, yeah, they wanted to know where was the smoke going. How are they going to get wood to run it, to start fires, cook things. The garbage room I always like to have for humanoids. Like, how are they getting rid of their garbage? Usually, I have like they're throwing it into the underground river, or they're just digging a hole in the cavern and burying it. Or recently, I had one which is quite common. There's the Otiug, which is sort of the traditional garbage monster, and these pirates just had an Otiug captured in this big pit, and they just threw the garbage in there all the time, and it ate everything. Um, then you have the potential. There's cells in a prison, slave pens, so people could be captured. I love that as an opportunity to introduce interesting characters. Often in our adventures, people who've ended up helping the party were people that were rescued by them. And it's also a good chance, though, to sneak in a spy or someone who's not going to help the party.
So true.
Hint,
So
hint.
so true.
Um, then we have the treasure room, or treasure vault. So, these are always going to be locked. They're always going to have traps. They're always going to be heavily guarded. And, the more complex, the more difficult it is to get into it, the better treasure I would have inside.
Okay. I think that sort of balances out from, risk, challenge, reward. Okay. I can see that.
Yeah. And actually, what I do for most adventures that I prep is I just have a list of treasure, including, coins, magic items, art items. And what I do is I just have a list. And then as the adventure goes on, after encounters, depending on how tough it was and what the situation is, then I decide what things from that list now go as loot. Sometimes that means that if I've decided, oh, this encounter looks like it's going to be good for those two potions of healing, then maybe the bad guy actually will drink one of them during the fight, and it's only going to be now one potion of healing left. Or if maybe there's a +1 dagger, and maybe in the fight that's damaged, so it doesn't actually end up being used. But I basically keep a list, and I save the really good stuff for, the treasure vault, or, the big encounter of the night. That's what I'm saving it for. And again, depending on how challenging the fight goes and how things go, that's how I divide it up.
Well, especially when you have, like, one of my favorite things is like finding stuff that you wouldn't normally expect to find it. Like, there's a few times where I know that we found treasures that are have been thrown away, and there's a whole story there that you don't quite know. Like, you know, Jeb's sword, a +2 thing that sets itself on fire, or you can talk to it, or whatever it might be, is in the trash, and you're like, why would this be in the trash? But the thing is, a lot of players will be like, oh, it's the trash room. All right, moving on. And you could actually have like rewards like that. That I just kind of like that kind of stuff. Like, you kind of want to dig around. Like, when I'm in Skyrim, I'm in every corner. If I go into a place, I want to look for everything, because you might find that one little thing. Oh, that's a ring. I should probably use that to defend against, I don't know, evil vampires or something. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things you could do that could be done that players would hopefully encourage them to seek challenge, like wandering around through the muck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I do too. There's almost no location or NPC that I have who doesn't have something, right? So once in a while, there might be a room where there's nothing in a dungeon, but I'd say 95% of the time, every single room indoors or on a ship or on the NPC's person, everybody has something. It might only be like 10 silver pieces, or it might be like Shane said, it might be, maybe a diamond got, accidentally dropped into one treasure chest when another one was getting cleaned out, and they thought it was empty, and it ended up getting thrown into the garbage room. Maybe the chest is all like, maybe it's, got damaged, and they threw it in there. And now there's like a 1,000 gold piece diamond in the muck in the garbage room. There's a million reasons why something could be somewhere. So that's why I put something everywhere, pretty much.
Something I did for a game was one of the NPCs that had joined the party had actually started stealing things. And so that character had built up, like when the party defeated a creature and started searching bodies and stuff, they would find things. But if that character at the time was either near the thing or were somehow in proximity, I would actually take, like, oh, I'll take that, and now I'll give that to that character, so the players won't find it, but that character did. And then if that character ever died, then, which he eventually did, and they decided to search the body for any useful things, it's like, why is he carrying 25,000 gold? Like, what's going on? Not that that would be it, but I'm just saying something with value. And they're like, how did this character? He's been carrying, and whether or not the players would kind of go, wait a second, we were looking for that thing that we were told was over here. So that kind of stuff could be done too. That would be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like thieving like characters, so why not?
Definitely.
I can totally see your characters doing that.
So then we come to the final chamber, or the main room. It could be the quarters of the villain, or it could be their like throne room or their meeting room. It's going to be more elaborate. It's going to be bigger. Again, a good place to have a fight. Most D&D parties are 4 to 6 characters usually these days. It's funny because I think back in the original D&D, I would say most parties are more like 5 to 10 even, or 5 to 8. They used to be
I remember playing with larger groups. I remember
Yeah.
playing with probably 15, 20 people at one time back in the mid 90s, I think. Early 90s, most likely.
I
But
think part of the reason was we were younger. Like most of the players back then were young because the game was brand new. And we had more time, more free time. And then when we were teenagers and a bit older, we had more, again, more time and more energy. And we
now we're like, okay,
and
we
then
played
the
for an
big-
hour, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, well, and you hang out with bigger groups of people at that age, and maybe you go to school with them or you play sports with them. You're in a club together, And yeah, to me, that's my recollection too. There seem to be more bigger groups, and I think you're at that age too. You're more open to having a bigger group. You're more, you get less, you're less caught up in your own routines and ways, I think.
Exactly.
Um,
No, I totally hear that, man. I
yeah.
totally hear that.
So a bigger area usually is more realistic for a big fight with the big villain. It's cool to have levels. Again, that's something I didn't mention, but you could have like ledges in the dungeon with things. I guess I did mention it briefly, but you could have ledges where things are hiding, or different. There, we talked about that one famous chamber. I think it's in White Plume Mountain, where there's like
Mhm.
different levels, which is pretty cool. Um, Sometimes I've had levels inside with ponds or like indoor water features. There's my accent. It almost never comes out, but when I say water, there's just no doubt about it. Um, so yeah, elaborate, very big, can have levels. The cool thing I think too is to have waves of enemies. So maybe there's like, the say the big bad evil guy is a vampire. Maybe his first level of defense are zombies, and then maybe after that are whites, and then you've got like vampire spawn. So having like waves of enemies, you can really use the environment too. Again, if there's natural water, like underground rivers, or maybe the ceiling is open, so you have things that could drop off the ceiling, like piercers, or
Yeah.
there's a roper.
I think
Um,
isn't it in I think it was when we were playing the last few sessions of Strahd that the I don't know if this is in the manual itself, like in the adventure, but there was a moment where we could actually break something to let in sunlight, and
mhm.
I don't remember. No, I don't think that was. I don't think that's actually in the module. I think that was just the adventure that we were doing, and somebody came up with the idea that we could have more sunlight or light up the area or something, and
Mhm.
and that did we break the wall or a window? I can't remember,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it
I think
kind
you're
of it
right.
gave us a slight advantage against Strahd because he's such a
Yeah,
powerful character.
yeah, I think somebody found a way to destroy the wall, you're right, and bring in sunlight. Yeah.
But
Um,
I don't recall if that's actually in the adventure, if it's actually but that kind of that kind of improv. If let's pretend for a moment that it's not in the actual book, but that kind of improv stuff where a character can say, "Hey, I want to do this thing," and the DM go, "Actually, you know what? That's pretty logical. You're not asking for a nuclear weapon. You're just like, oh, if I break this window, is it going to help?" Because then you have an escape route potentially. You've got
mhm.
light that the villain might have to avoid in that particular case. But anyway, yeah, that just kind of struck me as final battles. Like there's all kinds. I find that players get more creative in the final battle than anywhere else in a dungeon because they're suddenly up against something that's not just a minion, and as you said, waves of enemies. Like, oh, good, we just finally killed off the. Oh, six more just walked in through the door because the
Yeah.
noise attracted them or something, and yeah, those kinds of things are important in
Yeah,
some
well, I think
cases.
that's what everybody's waiting for. You're right. Like, they're waiting for the vampire or the dragon or the beholder. They're waiting for like, or the evil priest or archmage. They're waiting for a lich. They're waiting for the big guy or the big thing or the big her to
Yeah,
deal with. Another good thing to have are constructs. You can have them around the dungeon, but an intelligent enemy might have a whole bunch of them in their main chamber. And then you
yeah.
just mentioned escape route, which is a good point. And a clever, intelligent leader of a dungeon, they would have another way out. So that's another aspect that you could add as well.
Yeah, because you don't always defeat 100% the big bad. The big bad is, does sometimes get away.
Yeah,
And, they might leave all their treasure behind. They might leave all that sort of stuff behind. But, vampires are quite a classic character that if you hurt them enough, they're not dumb. They'd be like, if I hang around, they're just going to murder me. So
yeah,
puff of smoke and I'm going out that window and I'm going home and I'll deal with these guys later or maybe I'll never see them again. but those kinds of things actually can happen with smarter adversaries. So
For sure.
and
Like
I
almost all of those that I mentioned, like, a lich would escape, a high level wizard or cleric, um, a dragon, many, many intelligent creatures, they would have a way out. And if things were going bad, they would try to get out. If, they might try
and a
to
lich too. A lich might be like, yeah, kill me, whatever. My corpse is like 600 miles to the south, so whatever. I'm just gonna reappear there. So it'll be
yeah,
a lame. I'll have to walk back to kill you, but
yeah, yeah, their
there's stuff like that.
phylactery. Yeah, if they don't have access to their phylactery, then they're going to be returning. So take me down.
Go right ahead. I don't need that gold. Whatever. I got more at home.
Yeah, you're going to pull an Obi-Wan Kenobi, right?
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
rise more powerful than ever if you strike me down.
The characters encounter the lich like an adventure or two later, and he's like
Yeah.
all glowy and stuff. He's like, see, I told
I
you.
should do that. I should have somebody like that who's like, if you defeat me, I will come back twice as strong. So let's make a deal instead.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That would definitely give some players pause to be like,
Oh, I know.
right?
I
If
know
we
there
kill
are
you,
some
like
people
right
who
away.
would. Yeah. Personally, if I was playing, it wouldn't bother me at all. But I know there are players who are like, maybe we can make a deal.
The deal's gonna suck and go south on us, but
Well, in my story, alignment still matters, so there'll be consequences.
that is so true. So true. The final chamber. It is a goal, and when they're gorgeous and beautiful after the fact, like after you defeated the big bad, that makes it all the worthwhile.
Oh yeah. 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 And next time we are going to have a very unique show whereas we will be streaming live on the last hour of the Kickstarter.
That is right. So that means next Thursday, May 25th of this year, we'll be streaming. I almost didn't get that out. We'll be streaming from 5 to 6. Is that correct?
5 to 6
For
Pacific Standard, yeah. 10
5 to 6, where we'll be talking to you directly. Hopefully, you will all have time to show up and hang out and talk about D&D and, well, basically whatever else happens. I mean, there could be dancing bears, owl bears, or there could be,
Doubt Trouts.
both doubt trouts. Yeah, we just sit around going, there was something we were supposed to talk about, but I don't remember what it was.
And remember that people always, anyone can send a message to us on the podcast links now. You can send a voice message.
That's right. That's right.
I think somebody sent Fiend a message actually on that already.
Really? Oh! I should look. I'll look after. I did. Sorry, that got really exciting. But overall, yeah, definitely leave us a message there. You can send us questions, and then we will bring them in. We'll listen to it, and we'll bring that into whatever show it is. But definitely get involved, because as we were saying earlier about how small publishers being supported is really a great thing to do, because ultimately it's not a huge amount of money. You're not giving over $2,000 for a product. You're giving something reasonable, and getting some really great stuff in return, because we generally can't compete with the likes of Hasbro, where they're making however many things every year. But part of that is to also get involved in our community. We have a Discord, we have Facebook stuff, we're on Twitter. There's all kinds of ways to yell at us about how wrong we are about everything, or giving us kudos about how right we are about everything, or of course anything in the middle. Because at the end of the day, no matter what we say, it is just a game. And if you don't know that, you should probably get outside more, because maybe just a little fresh air, that you can come back in and roll some dice and be like, actually, this is really fun.
I'm just thinking we could actually take questions too from
oh yeah,
from maybe Twitter or Facebook, we could do that next week as well.
Yeah, because there's all kinds of stuff that you might want to know. I know everything, so there's nothing I need to know, but you might.
It's gonna that section of that part of the broadcast is gonna be called "Just Ask Shane." Just ask him.
Just
He
ask
knows.
me, because I'll just tell you everything.
Yes.
But honestly, yeah, come by next week. It'll be fun, and I certainly hope you guys can make it. And even if you can't, we're still around. There'll be a show the week after, and we're going to talk about all kinds of other cool stuff. And don't forget the Kickstarter still running, and it'll be down below. Stretch goals, stretch goals, stretch goals. Stretch goals are not something that that you should just ignore. Gather support. Tell people about it, and if they are interested in getting a really high quality book, or maybe some several books, do it, because what have you got to lose other than be bored on a Saturday night and have nothing to read? Because that's the other thing about the books; they're fascinating to read. The stories contained within the book, just by itself, are pretty damn cool and kind of unique. So there you go. I'm gonna stop tooting horns because I just love them, and I want 20 more books because I'm an addict. What can I say? But anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you guys next week at the live stream and all kinds of fun stuff. Bye.
Later.